I'm just waiting for confirmation that the meeting is recording to come up. I have that confirmation, so I'll now take the sederunt for the meeting of the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee of the 3rd of November 2021. Councillor Allison, I see that you're here. Also Councillor Anderson. Councillor Bradley? Nothing from Councillor Bradley?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. I have apologies from Councillor Brown and Councillor McGeever. Can you confirm that you are substituting for Councillor Brown and are present at the meeting?
Yeah, I'm here and substituting for Robert.
Thank you. Councillor Chalmers is here. Councillor Convery is also here. Councillor Cooper? Nothing from Councillor Cooper. Councillor Craig, I see that you're here, as is Councillor Devlin. Councillor Dorman?
I think she's having some difficulties getting in, Pauline. She's just messaged to say she can't join.
Right, perhaps we could get IT support onto that. That would be helpful. So we'll wait and just double check back for Councillor Dorman. Councillor Fagan is here. Councillor Faulkner? Nothing from Councillor Faulkner. Councillor Hamilton is here. Councillor Harrow is here. Councillor Horsham is here, as is Councillor Lockhart and Councillor Logan. Councillor Loudon is here. Councillor Lowe? Okay, nothing from Councillor Lowe. Councillor McAdams?
I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGuigan?
Apologies from Councillor McGuigan.
Thank you. I have apologies from Councillor Miller. I also have Councillor Nealon.
Yes, I'm here, Pauline.
Thank you. Councillor Ross is here. Councillor Shearer?
Here, Pauline.
Thank you. I have apologies from Councillor Wark. Councillor Wilson is also here. And we have a number of officers in attendance at the meeting also. And with that, I'll pass back to you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Pauline. First of all, let me apologise to colleagues for the lateness of today's meeting. The other meeting did go on at quite a pace. Can I also say that there was a suggestion as we left the last meeting that in order to try and cut down the length of today's meeting, that we take all of the items for noting as read, and that we only take the items for discussion forward at today's meeting. Can I have agreement from the members here that that's the way they wish to proceed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thanks very much. And just my apologies to officers who may have had reports which they were going to give that we now don't need deemed necessary at today's meeting. I do apologise for that. We'll take the declaration of interest initially. Does anyone have a declaration of interest? Nope. We'll move on then to minutes of the previous meeting. These are on pages 5 to 12. Does any colleague have any questions on the previous minutes? I don't see any hands raised. I'll take it then that I'll move that it's a correct minute.
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you very much. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thanks very much. So we now move on to the items for decision. The first of those is item 3, statutory climate change duties, pages 13 to 46. I would ask Julie Richmond to give us a report on this, please. Julie?
Yep, no problem. Thanks, Chair. As you said, this is about the Climate Change Duties Report for 2020-21. 2.1 states that we're looking for approval to publish and submit this report to Scottish Government. The report itself is attached to Appendix 1. I'll just go through the covering report. Section 3 details some background. States that we've been completing this report since 2015. Section 4 gives some details on the 6 sections that we're required to report on: organisational profile, our governance, our corporate emissions, what we're doing for adaptation, procurement, and the validation exercise that's been carried out. Sections 4.4 and 4.5 explain that we are working with graphics this year to develop a 5-minute animation that summarises the main points from this report. The format, if you've looked at appendix, is not ideal, so hopefully this animation will make the information more available and more suited to a wider audience. 4.6 on the covering report details some of the highlights that has been identified for this year, mainly to do with the carbon reductions that have been achieved, the renewable energy that we're generating, and the establishment of this committee and how it gives this agenda a robust governance structure. Also mentions that we're participating in Climate Ready Clyde. Section 5 of the report explains that it's Leslie and I that complete this report. However, Section 8 details all the different resources and services across the council who are involved in gathering the information that goes into this report. So very quick, I know we're time bound here, so it's just back to the purpose of this report is that we're seeking approval to publish this report and to submit to Scottish Government. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Julie. I'm really looking forward to the 5-minute film that we're producing. I don't know if anyone's taken cognizance of the short film we produced on climate change, which is out there for everyone to see at the present time. It really does show exactly what South Lanarkshire are doing, are intending to do to try and help us here in South Lanarkshire. So thanks very much. And I'll open this up to any colleagues who have any questions for Julie. Alec?
Quick one, John, or Julie. 65% reductions in carbon 2021. A lot of that will be due to COVID. Are you able to quantify that at all?
Julie?
Yeah, we can do. So the 65% reduction is back to 2005, which is when we first started reporting on our carbon footprint. However, from last year to 2021, there was a reduction of 19%. So yeah, I guess if you wanted to ignore the effects of COVID, you would maybe take 19% off of that.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm going to move the recommendations.
I'll second, Chair.
Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you, colleagues. We move on to item 4, which is Scottish Government consultation and Scottish building regulations. These are in pages 47 to 62, and I would invite Alan Macaulay to speak on this one, please. Alan.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, members of the committee. So the purpose of this agenda item is to advise the committee of the current Scottish Government consultation on proposed changes to building regulations related to energy standards and a number of associated topics, including indoor ventilation, overheating and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. The associated report sets out the proposed response to the consultation, which had been prepared in collaboration between colleagues within community and enterprise and housing and technical resources, and that response is appended to the report. The main part of the consultation outlines proposed changes to building regulations related to energy performance of buildings and seeks to support associated Scottish Government's commitments, as well as linking with proposed focus areas within the Council's next Sustainable Development and Climate Change Strategy. The Programme for Government 2019 to 2020 committed to ensuring all new homes are required to use renewable or low carbon heat by 2024. And this in turn led to the draft heat and building strategy being published earlier this year. So following that, we will have a new build heat standard in 2024, so that all new buildings must use new heating systems that produce zero direct emissions at point of use. And the proposals within this consultation, due for implementation next year, act as a stepping stone towards those 2024 requirements and move us further along the path towards net zero emissions by 2045. But the consultation also addresses, as I mentioned, related implications for indoor ventilation and overheating in buildings. And the other element of the consultation is related to electrical vehicle charging infrastructure in new developments to help, again, move us towards the transition to electric vehicles. There's over 50 questions in the consultations, and they've been grouped together in section 1 of the report. In preparing the Council's response, we've recognised the proposals will have implications for the Council in terms of its statutory role as Building Standards Authority, but also with regards to the delivery of the Council's own projects, including the new Council House Development Programme, for example. So in terms of the energy performance within the consultation, 2 options are set out for new buildings, domestic and non-domestic. And generally, the more advanced options will result in higher capital costs. But in our response, we support the advanced standard as they are more challenging. And we need new standards at this moment in time to be challenging, ambitious, but also at the same time achievable. The Council response is also supportive of the proposals within the consultation related to electric vehicle charging infrastructure, which would see a minimum provision being introduced within building regulations for domestic and non-domestic buildings for the first time. I hope the report and the proposed Council response fully and clearly outline the intended approach to this consultation by the Council, and on that basis the committee will agree the 2 recommendations within the report. But Chair, I'm happy to provide any additional clarification as required. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alan. Monique?
Hi, thanks very much for that information, Alan. It's an interesting report. I want to just ask a question, see, with regards to the consultation. So for us as an authority, we've went back and, said what we think. When we were saying what we think, because obviously it's got to do with like residential as well, did we extend these questions and approach any of the large house builders who it's going to have a knock-on effect to them as well, as to whether, what their thoughts and feelings were in this? I have another question, but if you answer that one first, that'd be great.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Councillor. Sorry, Chair.
No, carry on, Alan.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, Councillor. The consultation itself is yet to be submitted to the Scottish Government. The deadline is the end of November, and that has been extended to from the end of October. So it is a very, very popular consultation, perhaps no surprise to members of the committee. But the Scottish Government consultation itself does include a whole range of stakeholders, including national house builders. So they will be able to respond in the same way the Council is from their point of view and from their perspective. Just in terms of a bit of background information, there was a consultation that the Scottish Government undertook in 2018, specifically to stakeholders like national builders, to ask their opinion on where they see challenges ahead for their business with the programme of potential changes to energy design in new buildings. So the national house builders and other stakeholders within the construction industry have been involved in advance of this consultation, but also, Councillor, have the opportunity to submit their own consultation in response to this consultation from their perspective. And from my point of view, in the building standards side of things, we have made our local builders and contacts that we have and relationships we have with house builders, made them aware of this consultation, so they are fully aware of it, and I would expect quite a considerable and full response to be submitted to the Scottish Government from a range of stakeholders.
Thanks, Alan. Monique?
Yeah, thank you. So just to be clear then, so our local builders that are building on our CGAs, right, for our Section 75s in South Lanarkshire, they have been notified about this. So we have taken their thoughts and their views into consideration for us as an authority for what's happening in our authority.
No, to be clear, Councillor, our consultation is on behalf of the council services, not any individual stakeholders.
Right, okay, that's fine.
They do.
That's okay, Alan, that's fine. I just, do you know what it is? It's a bit, the reason why I'm asking this question, and sorry, Chair, I apologise, I should have went back through you. It's because obviously when we do something about home care, we had a big thing which everybody agreed on, which was that we needed to actually go out and ask the users of the service. So that it meant that we actually had a proper consultation with the people that it affected. So what you've been clear with, unless you tell me otherwise, is that we haven't done that with our builders. Is that
that's correct? Yes, Councillor. Yes, Councillor. It is a council response. Yeah.
That's fine. And Chair, subsequently, the other question I wanted to ask was, I think this is great what we're going to be doing with the electrical vehicle charging, and so that's great. Again, I just want to reiterate and have it on record that after the last meeting, it would be much appreciated if the officers got behind, operationally, got behind the elected members who all have an opinion that we would like to have as full a facility at Hare Myers for the £13 million that's been spent, and we would want to make sure that we actually are able to secure that the land does stay at South Lanarkshire Council, so that it means that the 1,200 car parking spaces can be built, which means that we would be able to have the electric charging facility for those spaces, because we have so many flats in East Kilbride and they're not going to have anywhere else to be able to charge their vehicles because we have a lack of spaces.
Thanks very much, Minnie. Your major view is well known in that. Okay, dokes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Katie.
Thanks very much, Chair. It was also on electric vehicle charging, specifically the answer to 51. So we're talking about what requirements would be for new developments. And I just think that's quite interesting to think about in the context of some of the new developments that I know have been built in my ward in particular, because so earlier there was the part about having chargers on, attached to houses and driveways, but a lot of these new builds by their nature, they've got, it's all about places for people, and they've got I think it's nature strips, the Australians call them, the strips of grass, and as a result, a lot of visitor parking can then be sort of removed a bit from the houses, and in the case of flats as well, so you might have some of the estates we've got, so you've got mostly houses with driveways, but then there's a block of flats which have got a shared car park. And I get why, I take on board the point about the percentage of people that currently own an electric vehicle, but I can see problems ahead if developers aren't asked to take that any further than just putting in the ducting, because when these new estates are built, they tend to be factored for a long time. So it will be up to the residents of the estate or the residents of a flat to agree to any improvements which are put in the next 5 years or the next 10 years. And I think if it turns out that there's only ducting there, and actually, well, you don't need just the ducting, you need some sort of other electrical components in there, and then you need to have this put in, and then you need to have chargers put in. I don't see how that's something that residents are necessarily going to want to take on board themselves if it has to then be a shared cost because of the way it's factored.
Alan, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, no, thanks, Councillor. I can take that on board, and I'm happy, if the committee agree to amend the consultation response to more fully support the full introduction of the infrastructure at point of construction. The other thing I would say, Councillor, is that this particular part of the consultation will be discussed further by the Scottish Government before implementation into building regulations. And I think the point that you make, I'm more than happy to include it within the consultation in terms of the approach from developers is very much likely to be the statutory minimum, and what that would mean for the ongoing cost implications for homeowners to install the full infrastructure further down the line. And there's an estimation, if you like, in terms of the uptake in electrical vehicle charging vehicles. And it may well be that we are underestimating that uptake, and within a very short period of time, that choice might be made by more members of the public, such that infrastructure is needed sooner rather than later. So, I am more than happy to amend that particular response in light of the point that you've made, if the committee are so minded.
Thanks very much, Alan. I don't know if members are aware, but South Lanarkshire did have a project submitted to Westminster for Levelling Up Fund. It was a £20 million project to produce EV infrastructure throughout South Lanarkshire, which would have made us an exemplar of the way forward as far as EV charging was concerned. However, we did get a letter last week saying that we were unsuccessful in our bid to have that taken on board, which was so disappointing. It meant that as a priority one area in Scotland, several of the areas that were given our projects were priority 3, which really makes it even more disappointing And one of the facts that was given to us for not having this submitted was the fact that we would not be able to produce the spend in 2021 that was expected of a project. And when you look at the idea that the UK government delayed the announcement by at least 2 months, which would have given us even more spend in 21, and that is so disappointing from South Lanarkshire's point of view. Just thought I would make that comment while we're speaking. Alec.
Now who's playing politics, John? What I was actually thinking of in this in general, though, is the associated topics that's with it, Alan. We're finding that Scottish Power aren't able to provide power in all cases for these charging points. I know it's not in building regs, but bigger is one of the examples we're looking to put charging points in. Scottish Power can't provide the power. Should there not be comment along the lines of the infrastructure needing to be upgraded to ensure that the jump that is going to happen in electric charging can be coped with? And secondly, again, in associated topics, one of the things that a lot of houses require is water, not always for drinking or cooking, for other what we call dirty water systems. Wouldn't it be better there to work them off gravity rather than a pumping station? And I mean that by that, rainwater.
Alan.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Just on the first point, I can amend the report to take on board the infrastructure question. It's kind of unfair, but I can bring it out more firmly in the response. That's not a problem, because I think in consultation with colleagues in roads and housing and technical resources, but there was mention of the capacity of Scottish Water to upgrade the infrastructure to meet demand. So it's certainly a point that we can feed back. No worries. On the other point, I can maybe feed back to you offline, Councillor. I'm not sure if I pick up the context of the point in relation to this particular consultation, but I'm happy to have a discussion after the meeting.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Alex.
Okay.
Right, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks very much for the report, Alan. Really quite comprehensive response. I'm going back to the charging points, and Monique raised this for likes of stations. We will be having problems with what I think they call icing of charging points, where somebody goes along to the train station at 6 in the morning, plugs their car in and doesn't come back till 6 at night, not allowing other people to use them. So are we taking into account places where we have these points where people are making a 2-hour visit, maybe a leisure centre or a community hall or shopping areas, that sort of thing? Is that part of it?
Yes, it is included within the scope of regulation. The predominant direction is minimal provision for domestic and new non-domestic buildings, but there is criteria for existing situations as well. But the Scottish Government at this moment in time, they are not completely agreed on the legislative mechanism for enforcement of that. So it's something that in terms of the issue you mentioned there, the practicalities of accessibility and in terms of the icing of the points, we can feed that back as well. I think as well, I mentioned before about the need for further consultation on this particular item as well. So it's not going to be introduced as early as the changes to the building regulations. And I think that it recognises the type of comments that members are submitting today. And as I say, we can include within our overall consultation. The other thing I would say as well is that in terms of the electric vehicle charging points, it is a new addition to building regulations, and there are members of our service that are far more up to speed with the practicalities and the details of EV charging points. I'm looking at my colleague Colin Park in Roads and Transportation, who may be able to provide some greater clarity than I am on that particular subject matter. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks very much, Alan. I see Colin and Michael's hands up. Colin.
Thanks, Councillor Ross. Just in terms of what Alan was saying there, I think there's a definite crossover between the kind of role of planning and building standards colleagues and ourselves. What Alan's talking about is new development, and we've been working closely with Alan and his team to kind of feed into this consultation. Picking up on Councillor Craig's point, been very fortunate over the last 18 months through the PACE project to massively increase the offer we've got out there in terms of community hubs and charging points within our car parks and within our park and ride. Positively, we are beginning to see issues developing where they're being used more often. But when they get used more often, that gives us the problems that you're talking about, Councillor Craig, in terms of people parking up. And there's 4 or 5 years ago, we had parking spaces that you could charge your car in. Now we need to have charging spaces, not parking spaces, and we need to have that evolution from parking where you can charge to this is a charging point, this is a charging hub. So some of the discussions that we were having back in March 20, just before COVID hit, was looking at what we have in and around our town centres, within our park and rides, and bringing in a balance, bringing in perhaps a kind of 4-hour limit in some areas to allow vehicles to park up, charge, and then move on. Bit of a challenge over at park and rides, because clearly people are coming in and going to the workplace, wherever that may be. Picking up on Councillor McAdam's point earlier on, I wasn't fully in the exec committee earlier on, but I'm certainly aware of a discussion over Hare Myers. The offer up at Hare Myers will be a park and ride as big as it needs to be, potentially up to 1,200 spaces. But there's going to be an offer up there that will be slow, fast, and rapid charging points. The slow ones will be you come in, you kind of plug in your car, you go to work, and you come back 7 hours later, your car's charged. It will also provide rapid infrastructure as well, so that will be people who maybe don't have an actual need to be at the rail station, but they're coming to the local charging hub. So if you've got a flat in East Kilbride or somewhere else nearby, Busby or whatever, you can come to this location. You can come in, you can park up, you can kind of plug into a rapid charging unit and get that 80-90% charge for 20-25 minutes. So these are good things. I think Councillor Craig, your point's well made, but the very nature of us being increased demand is beginning to see problems beginning to develop, and we're just trying to kind of stay ahead of the game. I think we've got currently sufficient infrastructure out there to meet the immediate demand, and I mean the next year and a half. Clearly, Councillor Ross, had we got the Levelling Up funding, that would have taken us on to another level. But I think we just need to kind of dust that one down, try and secure funding for it, and continue to expand the EV and network that we've got. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Colin. Michael, your hand was raised. I see it's down now as Colin answered the questions.
Yeah, just one last comment. It'll be for a report back to members at some point how we manage charging spaces, whether that's through charging or through traffic regulation orders. And I think Colin's kind of summarised it pretty well there. So we are very conscious of it as officers that we need to have appropriate management to allow turnover in the same way that we do with car parks. That was all, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Monique, I see your hands raised.
Thanks, John. It was just to say, Peter, I think that was a relevant point that you made, and it highlights why, from an accessibility point of view and a charging point of view, why we do need to have more. So I agree with you. And Katie, I also think that's a great point you raised with regards to, when it's built, and then you've again get the factors where it gets handed over, and then all it's going to do is it's going to give us as elected members a whole bunch of people coming to us that are then not happy as this comes in. So I do think that's something that we all need to work together on to actually get a good resolution in that. What I do want to point out is that, see, with regards to the consultation, we either need to consult with the people that are affected that we are speaking on behalf of, or it needs to be noted that we have chosen to basically put forward the opinions of our officers who have not consulted with the public. And I think that's wrong. So, it needs to be noted that that's what a decision that's been made within this authority, or what you need to do is you need to actually go out, and it's just like your planning department will know who all your developers are that they've worked with for the last 3, 4, 5 years, who's got planning applications in just now. There is no, it's crazy not to ask them. So it was just to say that I would like it either noted that we're going to, or noted that we're making a decision not to consult with them on a consultation that we've been asked to provide. And the other thing that I was going to say was, I think, John, I would really appreciate, and I don't know how we facilitate this, is see the paper that you were talking about to do with, or the reply you were talking about to do with the UK Levelling Up Fund. Is there any way that that paper can be brought here so that we can actually see, exactly where they say that we've went wrong? Because it's a bit like anything else. So it's just we want to know exactly where it is. Because when you're applying for any type of funding, there's an outline that you've got to comply within. So we want to find out where it was we went wrong. Is it an officer error, or is it a simple case of it's just they weren't going to give us the money anyway? So I think that paper needs to be brought here, because that'll make a difference. And the other thing that I was going to say was, if it turns out that it's just a simple case of that it really is down to that time frame, then I completely agree with you. And I think that Westminster has been ridiculous over this. I would say that the SNP put a really tight line of a year also on the town centre fund, which worked for some people, but it actually ruled out others. So there's a bit of what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Thanks, Monique. I'm not really sure on what consultation you're talking about and who you're looking to consult on.
Sorry, John.
The buildings situation is a consultation as a result of what we think at council level, and it's for others to put forward their thoughts on the matter from their point of view. So
I understand that, John.
We're not depriving the consultation. What we're saying is it's up to other people to put forward their views on that consultation.
John,
I'll bring in Michael on this one just to verify what I'm saying is correct. Michael.
Yeah. So, excuse me. Sorry. Just on the Levelling Up Fund, just for collective members' benefit, there has been a few inquiries which I've responded to, one or two. Just to go back, we're incredibly disappointed with the decision. I think that's fair to say. We had an awareness session probably 6-7 weeks ago just to bring members up to speed with that, and I think dealing with Councillor McAdam's question, I think we probably need another session of that, but only when we get a response back on our unsuccessful bid. So Cleland has written to the UK government asking for that explanation, pointing out we think they haven't read our bid properly, because one of the reasons why it didn't pass was no spend this financial year, and we indicated we could spend this financial year. So once we have that, we can feed back. The related point, John, is what happens next. We're not clear what happens next in terms of timescale for the Levelling Up Fund, or indeed for the Shared Prosperity Fund, although I did pick up there's a wee article on the BBC News page, although I don't know what that means in practice. So basically what I'm saying just now is that we're seeking further information, and once we receive that, we'll clearly have to come back to members and keep you all informed, as we said at the members' awareness session. And not to labour the point about the consultation, I do sort of get the point that Councillor McAdam is making, but if we were to seek the views of the collective development industry, which includes commercial, retail, other aspects of it, trying to synthesize them into a single view, I think that would come up with real practical issues, and it is much more straightforward for the council to represent its views and the commercial aspect, developers, whoever, to represent their views, and then it's down to the Scottish Government to have the difficult job of trying to manage their way through to a new system. So I think that's the right thing to do in my view, but I'll just stop there, but hopefully that's clarified some of the points on the LUF. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can I come in with subsequent, please?
Yep.
Just to say that's fine. So effectively what Michael's saying is we have chosen as an authority that what we're going to do is we're going to give our view, which is our officers' views. We aren't going out to ask anybody else, and that's the decision that we've made, which I fully respect. I just wanted to know if that was what we were sticking to. So we have consulted within our officers, within ourselves. We haven't went out and sought any answers from anyone else.
Right. Thanks, Monique. Yeah, that's clear now. Okay. Alec?
Yeah, sorry, John, for coming back in. It was just on what Peter was asking, because I had actually asked officers directly about this question of parking and blocking, charging parking spaces. And the response I got was that it would be illegal for a combustion engine car or a non-electric car to park in one of these spaces. But because of the traffic management order that we have in place, that if you have an electric car, you can park in these bays, whether you are charging or not. And that was because of the traffic management orders that we had in my understanding. Colin, I see you've now got your light on, I've stirred you. Is that a South Lanarkshire traffic management order? Therefore, we have it in our power to change it, or do we not?
I'll ask. Colin?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Ross. Yeah, very much so, Councillor Allison. That is within our gift. So we, like I said to Councillor Craig there, we introduced a traffic regulation order in infancies of a number of our sites to ensure that they're not taken up by a combustion engine. So we gave a bit of preference to electric vehicles, and that worked because initially what was happening is people with diesel and petrol engines were parking in them, they were abusing them. So we had to do a degree of control. We need to evolve that TRO a wee bit more now, and it's sadly some of the electric vehicle drivers that are misbehaving as well, and some of them are coming parking all day. And I think we're just in that transition again, and we're just trying to get ahead of the game. So there's a fine balance between introducing too tight controls, to say it's 3 hours, 4 hours, because each and every different car has a different charging capability. Some have fast charging capability, others don't. Some will charge up in 3 hours, some will take 7 hours. So there's a wee bit of an exercise I've asked my team to look at what an average charging session would be. Again, some cars that come in, you can clearly come in. And Montrose House was a good example. The very, very start, the bays that were at Montrose House became parking bays. Somebody could charge up on a Monday and they're 7 hours parked up, have over 200 miles. They don't actually need to charge again until Friday, depending on where they're going. But they were parking there. And to be fair, I had a hybrid. I was doing it at the very, very start as well. But clearly, as the demand picked up, you had to realise, well, do you know what? You can't take up that parking space. And you had to come in, set a note on your phone. 2 hours later, my car's charged. I'm going to move it. So it's that behaviour change. We need to give them a nudge, and we will be amending the TROs as part of any kind of future changes. And I think, as Michael touched upon there, that will form part of a kind of future traffic management discussion, looking at times, perhaps looking at tariffs, and options moving forward. But yes, it is within our gift. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Colin. I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm going to move the recommendations. Sorry, John.
I was just going to say that there's a very simple solution to car parking or occupying charging points. But if you've got a vast site like the one that's proposed at Hare Myers, you employ a parking valet, a man to charge your car and then move it to an ordinary space. It's not beyond the scope of us to do, and it actually creates a job as well for somebody. So yes, there's just different, looking at things from a different angle.
Well done, John. Well, positive thinking. Thanks very much. I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm going to move the recommendations.
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you. Have we agreed?
Agreed.
Thanks very much. We move on then to item 5, which is active travel, feasibility of bike hire scheme, pages 63 to 72. And if I can ask Colin to speak to this, please. Colin.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to advise the committee on active travel projects, the introduction of a bike hire scheme, community engagement exercises that are ongoing, and the provision of e-bike infrastructure across South Lanarkshire. I know it's been a long day for many of you, so I'm not going to go through what's quite a full report and just kind of pick out the highlights and summary. So Section 3 sets out the background, and it notes that back in March this year, the Council considered a motion put forward to discuss cycle hire, and following discussion we agreed that a report be taken to this Climate Change and Sustainability Committee to update members on a number of factors, namely the work that had already been undertaken in relation to active travel and ongoing cycling infrastructure projects, the status of the Glasgow Nix bike contract and feasibility of joining or otherwise, any suggestions on how new community consultation work in future of cycling could be taken forward across South Lanarkshire, and how the availability and use of electric bikes might be significantly expanded. And as I said before, this is the report that's before you today. Section 4 sets out a summary of the existing national cycle route networks across South Lanarkshire, and also touches upon the local kind of feeder networks that are in place across many of our towns. Section 5 provides detail of recently completed works and those that are ongoing, including those in East Kilbride. Touches upon new cycling counting equipment sites. We're looking at cycle parking at town centres and schools, safer routes and car-free zones, and four spaces for people projects. I know many of you will be aware from communications last year. Section 6 outlines the background to the Glasgow City Council Nix bike scheme and the options for joining, noting probably the key point from the discussions at the motion that in the short term there's no real option to do so, noting the contract was put in place in 2017 with that running for 7 years and potential for a few years extension. So the earliest we could join, should that be proved feasible, would be 2024. But there is the potential at that point, should we feel it necessary or feel it appropriate as a council, we could have discussion with colleagues in Glasgow to join, albeit there will be kind of potential financial considerations. Section 6 also notes that previously we completed a bike hire study a few years ago, and at that time it wasn't seen as being feasible, given the demands and the costs at the time. However, since then we've also had COVID, people's travel patterns have changed, people's perhaps working patterns have also changed, and they're maybe spending a wee bit more time in the local areas, exploring that whole kind of 20-minute neighbourhood concept as well. So the recommendation that's in Section 6 there is that we look to update that report, commission an external consultant to update it, and also look at it a wee bit wider, not just looking at previously we looked at East Kilbride and Rutherglen and Cambuslang, but just to consider whether a bike hire across all of South Lanarkshire, assessing the potential demand and considering whether joining up with a neighbour authority or running it ourselves would be a preferred route for such an initiative going forward. Section 7 notes an array of active travel studies that have been completed or are still ongoing across South Lanarkshire. It further notes that given the completed studies that are in place, the success of these and the engagement that's already ongoing, that this is the main kind of forum for us to develop and progress the development of our cycle and active travel network. And it's worth noting that paragraph 7.3 that the work that's in this paper and been discussed and developed through the cycling strategy, and where we report the active travel studies to, is to the cycling partnership group. That shapes and guides the development of these initiatives and projects that I've referred to in this paper. Section 8 notes the increased interest in the use of e-bikes and how the council can encourage the use of these bikes by providing adequate facilities for their use. First and most fundamental of which is having suitable high quality cycle infrastructure across our network, some of which we have discussed in this report. The second is ensuring that the appropriate charging infrastructure is available for e-bikes in public places. And we have done that recently. I know some of you may be aware of this out at Cambuslang Park and Ride project we completed in the summer. We've put in quite a significant EV vehicle charging hub. We also took an opportunity to introduce 4 locker-style charging points at that location, and we're beginning to kind of get an understanding of how frequently they are being used. We will obviously look to expand on that as much as we can, and where we are introducing significant hubs. And again, sorry for touching upon that again, the Levelling Up Fund would have provided us with a significant opportunity there. But whether it be through that fund or any future funds, we will look to expand the e-bike charging opportunities as much as we can. Coming to the end now, Section 9 notes that there are no employee implications at this time, but just does note, as a degree of caution, that any continued and sustained increased investment in this area will require us to look at our employee resources, just to make sure that we can continue to respond and actually deliver on some of the commitments that's coming forward as part of this funding. Section 10 sets out the funding for 21-22, and it notes that at present no funding for the bike hire study has been identified. We are continuing to discuss with SBT and Sustrans colleagues and with any other partners to identify a source. We're going to do a bit of an exercise to try and get an understanding of what that study will cost. And once we know that, we will look to try and secure that funding. Just worthwhile noting that we did actually bid to the Air Quality Fund earlier on this year for funding for this on the back of the discussions back in March, but that wasn't successful. Section 11 notes how the initiatives and projects outlined in the paper contribute to many of the Council's sustainable health and air quality objectives and outcomes. So committee, just turning back to the report recommendations, the committee is asked to approve the following recommendations, one being that existing and recent ongoing active travel cycling infrastructure projects be noted across South Lanarkshire. Two, that the status of the Glasgow City Council bike hire scheme and the potential for extension into South Lanarkshire be noted. Three, subject to funding been identified, arrangements made to update the previous study into the potential bike hire for all of South Lanarkshire, not just the areas that were previously covered. Four, that the previous and ongoing proposed community engagement in relation to active travel, cycling projects be noted. And finally, the e-bikes, infrastructure and opportunities for expansion be noted and explored where appropriate. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Colin, for that report. I must admit, as a keen cyclist myself, I'm really sceptical about ever achieving a bike hire scheme throughout South Lanarkshire. As you'll know, I use the roads to cycle most of the times. I have no fear myself of being on the road, but I can assure you 90% of the people I know will not go on the road unless we have the correct and proper infrastructure to allow them safe travel. I very frequently travel from here in Hamilton through Blantyre, Cambuslang and Rutherglen into Glasgow by bike, and although we've got cycle lanes in some of that route, you can hardly ever use them simply because of cars parked within the cycle lanes. And until such time as we segregate cyclists from actual travel, then I doubt we'll be able to get where we want to go as far as a bike hire scheme is concerned. However, I'll open it up to other members for their views, and I see Joe has his hand up to speak. Joe.
Thanks. As everyone says, conscious of time, so I won't prolong it. If I could deal with the first point, Martin Lennon isn't a member of this committee, but it was a motion he brought that I suppose reignited the discussion around bike hire schemes. Can I just ask Colin, you notice in the report that we've spoken to Glasgow City Council and we have their feedback. Can I ask, did we approach the next bike, I think the contractor's called, or any of the other contractors to just get their views on feasibility? And I suppose if we're following on from what John Ross has said, as someone that represents a part of East Kilbride that has had and still has some of the probably the best cycling infrastructure in South Lanarkshire, I'm not seeing the shift I expected to see, even as that cycling infrastructure has improved. And I do wonder, for example, of all the bike shelter spaces that we've created, what is their actual usage? It seems to me there are other factors, and maybe it is or maybe it isn't the bike hire scheme, but certainly there are other, whether it's behavioural or it's to do with work patterns, there are other factors at play here that I think we have to get our head around. The most obvious one's the weather, but there are other factors I think at play that we need to get our head around. Two quick questions, just in relation to 5.5, it mentions there a commitment to consultation. Can I just emphasise, Colin Part will know this from my frequent emails to him about some of the cycling infrastructure in East Kilbride. Can I just welcome that commitment to consultation and make the point that we can't lose support for this from the get-go, which I'm concerned is kind of what's happened in some places. It's actually if we have the early consultation about what these schemes look like and the public have got the opportunity to feed in and actually help us with the sensitive aspects of design, then you can build support for them. Because I have to say, I've had issues with actually quite dramatic changes to streetscape or the resiting of bus shelters and various other issues that I just think if people knew in advance what the plan was, they could feed into that, and we could probably include some of the other road users in that as well. And let's remember pedestrians. When we're investing in active travel, we're investing in pedestrians as well. And then my other question is just in relation to 5.14, which deals with the temporary measures, and I've also got some of the temporary measures in my part of East Kilbride. I am getting some feedback about motorists who are concerned about safety. If there's a blue light vehicle coming up behind them, where can they pull over to, for example? If we now have these, what do you call them? You've now got these bollards or whatever it might be that are kind of segregating the road. And I have to say, it's an experience I had myself not in South Lanarkshire, in Glasgow, where clearly a part of Glasgow had received spaces for people funding, and there's a fire station on that route. So it is an issue that I just think we'd have to consider. So those are the 3 points I wish to make, Chair.
Thank you very much, Joe. Colin, you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I'll come in, and I think I've hopefully captures most of them, Councillor Fagan. So in terms of your first point, yes, we did speak to Glasgow City Council. We've not directly spoke to Nick's bike because we couldn't. We can't engage with a particular operator at this stage. We did have discussions with Glasgow last time round when the study was undertaken. So I think before we do have discussions direct with an operator or a group of operators, we need to just understand what the demand is. I'm probably sitting on the fence with it. I think bike hire schemes, perhaps in some of your bigger cities where the dynamics are a wee bit different. You've got tourists coming, you've maybe got students who are coming to a town and they want to get about the town. If you're a cyclist in South Lanarkshire, with the exception of maybe some of our, for want of a better term, our tourist areas or some of our big attractions, you're perhaps more likely to own a bike as opposed to having to hire a bike. You're also maybe more likely to either charge it at home or live nearby where you could go and actually charge it if it was an e-bike. I think we do need to provide e-bike charging on our key routes to make sure that long distance travel can happen. Kind of local trips are absolutely fine. I think there's a bit of a barrier we need to look at as well about some of these bikes. I'm sure Councillor Ross would agree, are maybe not the cheapest. So leaving a bike out charging all day might not be as attractive to as many people. So Councillor Fagan, just come back to a point. We will be engaging with interested parties, Glasgow again, suppliers, once we understand what the demand is. In terms of picking up on what are we getting wrong, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's the weather, and sadly, I know we're all good at our jobs, but we haven't cracked that one yet. But we do need to provide good quality, high quality infrastructure. And I think Councillor Ross's point, I know I've chatted to you in the past about that. We've got a range of quality infrastructure across South Lanarkshire. We've got 10 years ago infrastructure, which was essentially some lines and signs. We've got five years ago infrastructure, which is probably the ones that you're experiencing, Councillor Ross, going through Cambuslang, where we took a bit of a bold decision. We reallocated some road space, but we didn't dedicate it. We didn't segregate it. We're doing that in East Kilbride just now, and I know Councillor Fagan and I have had kind of ongoing emails about that. That's a bit of a frustrating job for us. We're on the home straight with it, and we will be looking to complete that during the month of November. We are seeing, and I don't have them to hand at this moment in time, we are seeing some increased use across our networks. Obviously, massive increase during COVID last year, but we have captured some of that already. And I'm fairly certain that was reported recently to our cycling partnership. And if it's not been reported recently to the last one, it will be in the coming weeks. The emergency services issue, Councillor Fagan, we can look into that. A lot of the kind of temporary measures that I know were brought into Glasgow and some of our areas as well, I think have been beneficial. They've not been perfect. They basically appeared overnight. The very nature of them, though, they are temporary, and if there are issues like you've talked about there, then we can look at that. I think some of the bollards that are in place in some locations are probably quite tight, in other locations they are quite spaced out. So should there be a need for a vehicle to pull in or somebody to overtake, I think that could happen. Does that cover all of the points, Councillor Fagan? I think I get three of them there.
You okay with that, Joe? No, thanks, Scott. One of those issues I'll have to come back to, but thanks for the report, the response.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Lynn.
Thanks, Chair. Unlike you, John, I am really not happy cycling around Hamilton. I found it a very alarming experience the last time I tried to do it. It was driver behaviour was needing improved. My question, Colin, is 6.4. You mentioned financial obligations such as pump prime finding. What is that?
That's certainly from discussions in the past, through yourself, Chair. In the past, that is where there's obviously needs to be a big investment in the infrastructure, so whether it be the purchase of bikes, whether it be the purchase of the equipment, whether it be the introduction of the charging station. So that would be, for example, if South Lanarkshire were to look to roll out something in South Lanarkshire without a definitive understanding of the demand, we may have to put up a lot of money at the start to put the infrastructure in place, and there might not be the actual demand appearing later. So we would have to basically put it out in the first instance to see whether the demand is there. That's maybe a good idea, but I think we need to get a bit of a flavour of what the demand is there. And as I said, for a few minutes ago, I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether the demand and the requirement for such a bike hire scheme is there in South Lanarkshire, but I'm perhaps wrong. Been in kind of transportation for many years, and all our decisions and the development of projects going forward is based upon empirical evidence of how people travel, what people do. In the last 18 months, that's been thrown out the window, and we need to just maybe go out and start speaking to people, speak to the various community groups, speak to the cycling partnership in a wee bit more detail, and understand, do people want a bike hire scheme in South Lanarkshire or not?
So thanks. So to clarify, the pump prime funding is merely the cost of the infrastructure.
It's the cost of the infrastructure, the kind of the setting up of the scheme, amongst other things. So certainly what we're trying to say there, that unless we get a good understanding that there will be a demand, we would have to put money out as a council before we start to obviously get income coming in from MD using it.
Right, I'll take that as a yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alec?
Yeah, John, just concur with what you were saying about needing to move bicycles and vehicles into separate locations. The busiest place at the moment is in the rural roads for cyclists on a leisure activity. And different to what Lynn was saying, a lot of the cyclists there don't really show any respect for other road users. It's more difficult to get past in a car, never mind some of the other vehicles that can be out there. And yet there is nothing really in Appendix 1 here that is actually looking to address that problem. I do accept that this is more targeted at trying to get people out of their cars and onto a bicycle for getting about towns. But the big problem we have at the moment is actually in the rural areas where a lot of the leisure activity is taking place on narrow roads, etc., and causing problems.
Thanks, Alec. I go along with what you're saying part of the way there, but as a cyclist on rural roads, I take up a position in the road which is almost the position a car would take, because if I move to the curb at all, I'm forced into that curb by cars who then think they've got enough room to pass. So you won't be finding me taking up in a curb position. I take up a car position, and then I leave it up to cars to get by me. No,
that is understood, John. But the problem then is when you start to get a significant number of cars behind you not being able to get past and not drawing into the side to let them past. That is the problem that they cause, or riding in large groups across the whole road, and you can't get past.
Yep.
It's short streets and everything.
Understand, Alec. Kate?
Hi, thanks very much, Chair. First of all, I wanted to say thanks to Colin for going through this report. I'd asked that the motion could have been brought back to this committee, because I think it deserves this level of sort of consideration and all of the background information that we've now been provided with in one place. It's really easy to see. Wanted to pick up now, a few people had made the point about consultation, like Colin had and Joe had and so on as well. And I do agree, I think that's really important, and I spoke about that at the time with some of the issues that we'd had in Cambuslang relating to consultation when cycle lanes were being put down the main street there. I just wanted to highlight a really good example of something that I thought has been working well and probably getting quite a lot of data. We've just had Beat the Street running in Cambuslang and Rutherglen again. So obviously that was about active travel more generally than just cycling. But with that, when the kids get their fob, all of the parents, all of the families in the school are given a card. And I've been chased up now for sort of multiple surveys because I'd tapped my card a couple of times, and it's a trigger to get you thinking about things in the round, and it's linking your use of a bike or active travel to other factors as well. And it's asking about your well-being and asking about your physical health as well as just the act of commuting. And I think it's quite important to see active travel and cycling in the round like that. And I think Lynn's point was really interesting as well, just about confidence using the roads. And I think, like Colin said, I'm on the fence on the idea of a cycle hire scheme just now without something extra in place. I'm thinking about the work which Biketown do down in Rutherglen, which is fantastic because it's got all of that support wrapped up with it. So I'm not ashamed to say that this summer, for the first time in I think about 30 years, Biketown got me back on a bike. There's some pictures on Twitter for your amusement if you want to see them. But for me, that it was multi-factor. It was being able to have somebody to speak to about the idea. I wasn't prepared to make a huge investment, and it wasn't necessarily very easy to get bikes at that time. The bike that I ended up with was one that they told me they'd seriously considered scrapping, but they had managed to fix it. So there's an environmental benefit right there. But more than that, I had a sort of introductory. I got time to sort of have a go on it, go up and down and get a couple of free lessons or a sort of pay what you want type basis. And I know that there's follow-up as well. So there's a scheme to access where you can go along, and exactly what Lynn was talking about. You can go and build your confidence riding on streets and on roads with a group of people, which then, obviously can feed into future development. So that's the kind of thing I would like to see us looking at in conjunction with the idea of any cycle hire scheme, is what else can we put in place for people like me who really ran out of excuses not to try it again, quite frankly, once all of that was in place. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate, for these comments. Peter?
Thanks, Chair. As the chair of the cycling partnership, just to let Joe know that, there are regular updates on cycling within the partnership, and there is an increase, albeit from a low base, but there's a substantial increase in the amount of people cycling. And some of that is due to the extra measures that we've put in place. And I'd just like to say a big thank you to the outside members of the Cycling Partnership who come along to those meetings and express their views and help with design, etc. Can I just talk a minute about the types of cycling there is? You can be a commuter or a tourist, or you could be doing it for fitness. Lots of different things that you can do by going on a bike. And the amount of people who use bikes doesn't necessarily depend on the infrastructure that's in place. There's a new town down south that I keep forgetting the name of, I think Slough or down about there. The new town was designed around separating cycles from cars. And the uptake in cycling in that new town is probably a couple of % more than the UK as an average. So it's not just about having the infrastructure. If you look at the most successful towns where bikes are used all the time, you're looking at places like Cambridge or Oxford, nice and flat, yes, but what they've actively done in those places is block off roads. So everywhere you go in those places, if you're driving a car, you're hitting dead ends everywhere. So yes, you can get wherever you want in a car, but it takes you a lot longer. Therefore, it's more convenient to take a bike than it is a car. And that's the key point about how you change from where we are now to where we need to be in the future, is it's got to be more convenient for people to use a bike than to take a car. Now, I'm not advocating we block off all the roads in Hamilton or East Kilbride, but what I'm saying is once you reach that point, and that could be because petrol reaches a price of, £100 a litre or whatever, or it could just be the electric bikes help, all the little things that help people get on a bike and use it. But convenience is the key. But we've also got to look at things like tourism, where hopefully when we do get some, if we ever do get some levelling up money, it would be for the tourist routes. Because I'd love to see that, where people can use bikes on tourist routes throughout the whole of the south of Lanarkshire and down into the borders, or vice versa. That would be a terrific thing. But that's the key point to cycling. And my past 5 years as the chair of the cycling the cycling committee. Thanks, yeah.
Thanks, Peter, for these comments. I think we've got Mark. Mark?
Thanks very much, Chair. I'll apologise if I'm saying something that's been covered before. I'm obviously standing in today, and I've also only kind of brief period to look at the papers. But I'm wondering if perhaps we're maybe missing a wee trick somewhere, and I've no evidence for this at all, but it occurs to me that behaviours are easier to create than they are to change. And that generally I wonder if, rather than, we could spend a massive amount of time and effort trying to get people like me to be less lazy, to leave a car alone and to go buy a bike and get out and use it. But that's probably going to be a lot less successful than if we can still instill in, kind of young kids the idea that you use a bike every day, that it's really convenient and that you can take it everywhere. I'm kind of wondering is there any kind of talk with education here? Is there any kind of cross-departmental stuff so that we can say, look, is there any future we can imagine where every primary 3 pupil and up in South Lanarkshire has access to a decent, size-appropriate bike that's well-maintained, one that's they can, whether it's through a hire scheme, whether it's through whatever else, but something that would basically allow them, and I take Peter's point, actually a good one, I think, about the infrastructure not necessarily being the be-all and end-all, although I think it probably is. I don't think you're suggesting that it's not important either, but I wonder if we could get to a point where kids have access to bikes to go to school and safe cycling routes, possibly away from roads or marked out in a certain way, or at least on the road network, catering for them more. In 10 years' time, would that not lead to more adults who are using the bike to go everywhere than it would if we don't focus on building up those behaviours from a very early age? So apologies if that's a bit off topic, or if it's something that's been covered elsewhere.
No, you're quite right, Mark. We have actually bikeability schemes, and we actually have employed a couple of people like Biketown who we actually get bikes taken around different schools, although I think Councillor Mars was instrumental with myself in having a look at this some time ago when we looked at the rural areas where kids really couldn't take their bikes to school in the morning simply because of the traffic situation. However, what we were looking at was a supply, if we could supply a number of bikes to schools to use for bikeability, so that it didn't matter whether you owned a bike or not, you had the chance to actually get to ride it. And then, of course, we brought in Biketown to help with that situation as well. So we do have a scheme just now. I think probably Katie will probably know more about it from the education side, but we have that up and running. Katie, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think you've covered most of it. Actually, there's been, I saw that on social media last week, there's bikeability happening all over the place at the moment. So much of my feed was filled up with pictures of kids on bikes. As John said, we've obviously got the scheme which is running, which provides a bank of bikes to go out to kids. And then there are local bits and pieces going on, as John said, like Biketown as well. There's also obviously the Scottish Government pilot, which is underway. I think that got underway in August to provide provide bikes to children who couldn't otherwise afford them, and that's rumbling. The pilot's rumbling away just now, and then we'll see what comes out of that. But I think that there's potentially that could be a really great thing to take forward. I think it's partly about the bikes, and it's partly about having the bikeability courses and so on, and having children's confidence built up like that. But there's other kind of smaller things as well, which I think are important, and you can see it running through different resources, as well as through education itself. Practical things like the provision of bike shelters outside schools. So when new schools were built and when schools were refurbished, we've got bike shelters now. And actually, one of the most recent planning applications which we had, which was with a school, was showing the layout of the new playground as it's going to be, and they're putting in one of those fake roads, the sort of with the junction and everything as well. So it's wee things like that, making sure that the infrastructure is there and that's normalised, and the children see that all the time, and it's something that bit of the resource is built in, as well as the very practical needing bikes and helmets part.
I hope that goes some way to answering your question, Mark. Okay. I see that of Eileen, your hand's up.
Oopsie daisy. Sorry, Chair, I'll not hold up the proceedings, but I've been very interested in what was getting said today, and I think every point is very, very relevant. But one of the points that Peter Craig made, I don't want to necessarily cycle, because I think I live in the hilliest town in Woolly South Lanarkshire, but I have taken up walking since the pandemic. I'm quite proud that I've never missed a day since day one of we were shut down the first time. And I know, and I leave my car now and go to places that I would always take my car. I would go to the swimming and take my car, but now I would walk, go to the church, take my car, now I walk. So I've done my wee bit for myself, but it is scary out when you're out walking in some of the roads, especially, as Alec Allison mentioned, in some of the rural roads, which is they're not very wide, and in some cases, and you get cars speeding, or not necessarily speeding, but not really assuming that they're going to meet somebody, be it a bike, be it a walker. Also, there's been just recently in my caseloads, people now getting quite anxious about speeds of cars going up and down, and they want bumps, and they want this and they want that. So there's a whole lot of different things that we should be doing to encourage people. Although it's bikes today we're talking about, and we have a bike hire, but encouraging people even just to walk, so much every day, and to try and leave your car. Now, my car's no move for, say, 4 days, and that's good. So there's a whole lot of things, and I think this is only a start of what we were trying to do. There's going to be a new council next year, and it'll take us into, it's not just an immediate thing, it will take time for things to get bedded in. And I think it's a whole mixture of a whole lot of different things. I know that they were saying there about bikes and schools and whatever, but one of the things that I have found, and I find it quite astonishing, is that when you're out walking, you see more out walking because you're just walking along. People discard bikes, wee bikes, big bikes. I don't know, they must just take them out and then get fed up. Those children, to leave them and whatever. I think a lot of children get bicycles at Christmas. They use them for a wee while, and then they just sit in sheds and different things like that. Because I speak to people and they'll say, oh, that was a waste of time or whatever. So also maybe we should be looking at to see if you could get a recycling thing going, where if people really don't want the old bike, or the new old bike, should I say, that they might bring it in for recycling and different things. Because I know that happens in our twin town in Germany. If your child or the adult wants a new bike or doesn't want the bike, it goes to a community-led recycling shop, and then it's put out into the community. So I think there's things for the future that, we absolutely can do. But I think what Peter Craig was saying was right. If we don't fix out the traffic bit, it is very difficult, because people are wary and will be wary. And the other thing Alec Allison said as well, also cyclists are needing to be, in some cases, educated well, because there's nothing worse if you are trying to drive and you've got about 20 cars stuck because 5 cyclists are taking up the road and will no move in. So there's a whole lot of different things, but I think it's all very interesting, and I think we're going in the right road. Thank you.
Thanks, Alice. And you're quite right, walking is part of active travel. walking, cycling, scooting. These are all, and I would like to say that Biketown and Rutherglen have the very situation that you're talking about. They'll take in discarded bikes, they'll do them up and replace them and put them out to the community, so that there is a facility there that we're actually doing at the present time. And I suppose as well, with a lot of kids, the young kids outgrow their bikes very quickly, and a place to put these bikes into is exceptionally required. So, yeah,
That's
not
right.
a problem there at all. Yep.
Can I just say at one point, the people in Germany who I went and saw, and Lindsay Hamilton I think saw it as well, and Catherine, what they said was that they didn't fling everything out for nothing. They actually brought people in, and if say you wanted that bike, they showed you how to repair that bike, and maybe it was only €5 to buy the bike, just for talking's sake, but they got an ownership of that bike because they'd fixed it, and and then they put in a donation, and away they went. And it worked like that as well, because you were giving people what's the word, sort of pride in what they were doing, and the fact that it was theirs, and it wasn't just, oh, I really need to get this for nothing because I've got nothing. So it was a whole big thing like that, and I think that's a good idea. But I think the next 5 years will see us going up a tremendous road, because I'll not be going back, I don't think, ever to just jump in my car all the time. Hopefully. Thank you.
Well done, you, Eileen. Monique, I see your hands up.
Yeah, thanks, John. I thought that was interesting, what you and Katie were talking about, and also Peter, because I didn't know that. I guess that's what happens when you're an elected member. There's only like so many meetings that you go to, but there's other stuff that's going on that you won't actually be aware of. So that was actually really interesting. And I agree with Mark as well. I think that behaviours are easier to create than change. So I think that it's good that there's things that we're doing, but maybe we can actually take it a bit further. It just reminded me of the Kevin Costner film, which I can't actually remember what it was called, and it was that thing, it was like build it and they will come. And I guess that's how I feel about the infrastructure. I feel as if we make the infrastructure safer and we make more of it, then younger ones will be more inclined to use it, because their parents will want them to use it and encourage them to use it. Therefore, then, as adults, they're the people that just automatically use their bikes rather than naturally going to cars. So I just think that it's like a short-term investment we're making that we're actually going to get a long-term gain, which is kind of like different from what usually happens. I think the only thing, and obviously Joe touched on it earlier on, that didn't work was, it's obviously like, partly to do with the pandemic, but it's also partly to do with the fact is that when we knew there was a problems with, biking lanes getting put in and whatever else, because there was a hold up in the work, instead of us front facing that and saying there's a problem, we kind of didn't do anything about it and just kind of hoped it wouldn't get pointed out. And then when it did get pointed out, it then seemed to get worse and worse and worse, because then it meant, because we hadn't headed it off at the pass, it then just became this talking point, and it's still getting dragged out, and it's kind of taken away from the good work that was actually getting done. So I think we need to have a different strategy for how things are done in the future, so that it means that the good work that is getting done, and it is very positive, that it gets the proper recognition rather than negative connotations. Anyway, that was it, and thanks very much.
Thanks, Monique. For a minute there when you started, I thought you were advocating we build baseball parks everywhere. If you build
not always a bad idea, John.
I was saying, hopefully we're not going to go down that road, but you're quite right. I don't think the problem lies an awful lot in kids. Kids are out on their bikes everywhere. It's when we become the sort of age 30 upwards that people are content to drive everywhere. Thankfully, we disposed a second car long ago, and my wife gets to drive everywhere, and I left with Yanks's pony or my bike. So at 75, I don't mind that. I would go everywhere on foot or bike, and we need to adopt that attitude for everybody. So it's the Marks and the Moniques that need to go off their backside and go onto a bike again, and take that forward, if you don't mind me interjecting with that wee bit. I think I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm going to move recommendations for this.
I'll second, Chair.
Thanks, Maureen. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thanks. Now, this was going to be a shorter meeting. It's not resulted in that. However, the next items 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10 are all for noting. And I think we agreed at the beginning of the meeting that we would take all of these in block and on the recommendations. Can I just move that we do that?
I'll second, Chair.
Are we all agreed, colleagues?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Listen, thanks very much, everybody, for taking the time today in both meetings and for the discussions that have taken place. And we'll try and sort it out a bit better for future. But thanks very much for taking the time for turning up. Many thanks.
Thanks, Chair.
Bye.